Hello, and welcome to Yogahub podcast, where we bring you conversations with some of the world's leading yoga and movement educators. In this episode, I'm talking to Susan Porter. Susan is a body worker who has a background in yoga, somatics, and biodynamic craniosacral therapy. A bit of a mouthful, but a really, really interesting practice. And her background eventually led her to TRE, which is a type of somatic therapy that looks to release tension and even potentially trauma that is being held within the body. Susan's going to join us at yogahub Camden Street for a workshop on TRE on the 25th of August, where you'll learn a little bit around the theory, you'll learn a bit about the practice, and also ways that you can then integrate it into your everyday life. If you're interested, you can find out more at yogahub.ie/workshops. Thank you very much for tuning in. Here's my conversation with Susan. Okay, cool. First of all, Susan, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to come on and have this conversation. How are you doing?
I'm really good, Brian, and thanks for asking me to do the podcast. It's good to meet you.
Yeah, lovely to meet you too. It would be nice to begin, if you wouldn't mind, taking a few moments just to tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to do the work that you are today doing.
Okay, yeah. Well, I do different types of body work, and I suppose I began my journey with yoga. So I trained in yoga about 20 years ago. And that yoga is one of those things, kind of just runs through everything, doesn't it? You know, I find that it influences everything I do. From yoga, I moved into, I kind of had some injuries and stuff, and I started to move into pain, stress relief. So I was doing somatic movement. I trained in that quite a while ago as well. From there, again, thinking about body work and working from that kind of bottom-up approach, I trained in biodynamic craniosacral therapy, where I met TRE. So sometimes we just things, you move into one area and something else is an invitation to explore. And we're here to talk about TRE. So TRE is what I trained in, and it fits really nicely in with a therapeutic model of body work. TRE is a really interesting way to release tension in the body.
Before we talk about the TRE, biodynamic sacrocranial therapy sounds interesting. What is that exactly?
It's a touch therapy. So yeah, the biodynamic part of it is that you allow someone else's body to do what it needs to do. So there's no direction you're going in. You're allowing their system to reveal itself. And the craniosacral is the cranium, the back of the skull, the sacrum, and it's a listening therapy. So you're listening to a client's body tell you the stories of what's going on, what the health tensions, the health, and really looking for health, promoting health. Beautiful work. It really is beautiful. And in some ways, it's kind of like, you know, the magic of, you know, that we have a lot of listening in our hands. There's a lot of nerve endings in hands, and it's proprioception, you know, that feeling what someone else's system is possible. And it's very healing. So it's the biodynamic part of it is somebody else finding their inner healer. So when the nervous system begins to downregulate, moving into a healing space where the tissues, the fluids, the nervous system begins to move into an easier place, and a bit of space comes into the body.
Yeah, I think I had a little bit done on me years ago. I went to see a guy who, I'm not sure if that's exactly how he described it, but it sounded like very similar work. And I always remember he got me to like lie down on his table. He came down and he held my feet. And to me, it felt like he was like moving me all over the place. Like I felt like I was like on a boat at sea. I could feel like my legs moving, arms moving, my head was moving, all these kind of things. And afterwards I was asking, I was like, oh, what were you doing exactly? What were the movements for? What was this? What was that? And he was like, to be honest, all I did was I just held your feet in a way that your body felt supported and your body adjusted itself. And I think there's so many different approaches you can take to body work, healing, whatever it is. But the practices that help you tap into the inner intelligence of your body are super interesting. Super, super interesting.
Yeah, and cranial work is like that. It's that listening and, you know, just realizing as if you're the client, that sense of there's so much that goes on internally that we don't really know about and don't really listen to, and those sessions give a little bit of time to listen to how fascia moves. So kind of what you're describing there, that's a possibility of what could be happening, is that the fascia is releasing and it's stretching and it's moving, or the fluids begin to find a way to move downstream or upstream, or whatever tributaries they need to go into.
And so as you said, you are now working in TRE. So if you wouldn't mind, explain to us in, I think always good, like simple terms if possible. But I know simple things or things that are not always that simple, but as in simple terms as possible, what is TRE?
Okay, so TRE, I'm a TRE provider and mentor. I mentor people through the process of training. And TRE, it stands for tension or trauma releasing exercises. You do a set of 7 exercises that are working through the flexor muscles of the body. So they're generally working from the ankles up through the legs into where you come into the psoas muscle. We all know about tight psoas muscles, and being able to do kind of seated positions in yoga becomes an issue. But generally in life, the psoas muscle, it's regarded as the place where we hold, and where kind of fear is held, where tension is held, chronic stress held in that area. It's a muscle that connects the torso to the lower limbs as well. So the exercises work up through the body, and they stretch, and a little bit of stretching of the muscles and a little bit of working of the muscles to tire the muscles out. Then you go into a butterfly position, knees wide, and with those tired muscles, it evokes a tremor mechanism, a trembling, shaking mechanism in the body. That's very much connected to kind of what's happening in the nervous system and the crosstalk down through the spine. And you begin to shake. And we don't generally in life allow ourselves to shake. It's not something, yes, there's voluntary shake and there's shake and qigong and things like that. But this is different. This is shaking is happening and you're allowing it to happen and giving permission for that release through the nervous system. And it's incredible. It's a real kind of tapping into releasing stress that is held, whether it's daily stress or long-term stress.
And so one of the terms that you just mentioned there, so trauma, is, I think, something that has become much more, I guess, been much more of a focus placed upon it in the last 10 years or so, or at least I've noticed much more emphasis placed on it in the last 10 years or so. And how would you personally define trauma? And I guess in particular, how does trauma impact on the body in a way that makes TRE exercises, for example, so beneficial?
Okay, so there's a few questions in that, and they're great questions. So thinking of the trauma part of it, so how I describe trauma is that anything that overwhelms us. So any incident that overwhelms us, anything that's going on in our lives that overwhelms our ability to cope. And that can be many things. The problem with the reason why TRE put in tension and trauma, they added tension at one stage because it seemed like trauma, some people feel like, oh, I don't have big things that have gone on in my life. So things that overwhelm me. And what we do, what we're thinking about in trauma terms is, if things overwhelm us, sometimes they don't seem like big incidents. Sometimes they're small. Sometimes it's accumulated stress. It's accumulated tension. It's anxiety provoking. So looking at the word trauma can be a little bit off-putting, even though in TRE terms is one of the statements that's made is there is trauma. If we take that as a fact, there is trauma. And then other elements of that is we can do something about it and we can heal from trauma. So that's what we're looking at in TRE terms, is that there is a way to release that held tension pattern in the body from incidents that have gone on during our lives, the stories that we hold. So there's a lot of written work on Peter Levine has worked on it, Bessel van der Kolk, around the stories that we hold in our bodies. The body holds the score, and that's what we're working with. We're working with that feeling of when we're overwhelmed, we kick into a primitive part of us, that the fight, flight, freeze response. And wherever we go to with that, when we're in overwhelm, it can be a really tried and tested path. It becomes really habitual in our lives. And in TRE, what we're looking for is to attempt to come out of that place, because the effects of stress, trauma, tension, anxiety on our lives really affects our health. If my body's held, even if my musculature is held, what is it doing to my organs? What is it doing to the fluid moving through the body? What's it doing to every system of the body? So they're the type of things that we begin to look at when we're doing work with TRE.
Yeah, I think I heard trauma described before. And again, maybe a very simplistic way of describing it. So I think it's also important that we don't like kind of understate the importance of like big trauma, which is obviously like a very difficult thing for people to work with. But a description I heard of trauma before is that it's like a desire to not repeat that event, which obviously can be something really, really big, but it can also be something a little bit smaller that still has this impact upon how we feel. And there's this desire not to go through that again. And I think for a lot of us, I know definitely myself, again, whether I'd use the word trauma for certain events, I'm not too sure, but there was probably things that would have happened to me in the past that I maybe just brushed over, in the sense that like, it was no big deal. When in fact it probably was having sort of lingering impacts on me that I didn't fully deal with at the time. And definitely this idea that our body kind of holds on to things a little bit, and that even if we're not super conscious of that, these things still have that lasting impact. And one of the things you mentioned earlier was this idea of like bottom up processing. I'm not too sure if you used the word processing, sorry, but this idea of like bottom up. And again, I was wondering if you'd maybe go into that in a little bit more detail for us, and the benefits of taking a bottom-up approach.
So yes, the bottom-up approach is that we begin to listen to what our body is telling us. So I touched into a little bit of that with the craniosacral therapy, that inner listening. So it's not only mapping what the body's doing, it's also mapping what the nervous system is doing. Usually we speed up when we're in situations that are triggering or that feel a little bit overwhelming to us, or a lot overwhelming to us. And that inner speed changes the way we behave, the way we hold ourselves, the way we think. It moves into all areas of our lives. So when we're working with the bottom-up approach, is that we're doing that inner listening, and that is the guide to how we're going to work. That knowledge and theory is not going to get us out of the place of the body holding. That listening to the body and beginning to work in a way that is not pushing to limits, that we stay connected and we stay in tune with ourselves, but also that we don't do the forcing and pushing, that we stay in we'll call it a window of tolerance. That's one of the terms that can be used. Stay with ease in the system. It's a lovely way of working, and that inner listening as well is incredible. There's so much that we can learn in how we behave in our lives from listening to what our response is in the body, tracking nervous system response.
And in your opinion, this is maybe going to be a big question in some ways, but what is it you think that maybe starts to prevent people from tapping into that inner listening? Because I know from my own experience, for sure, for a long time, I wasn't very good at listening to my body. And I, as a result, did lots of things that probably weren't particularly good for my body. So what do you think it is? And I don't know if it's maybe as we age and kind of get more conditioned by society, but why do we lose that ability to listen? And although it can sound kind of simple, like, why is it so impactful when we begin to tap back into that ability?
I mean, there's so many areas I could move to with that question. You know, society stops us from listening. We're told to ignore everything. Our family systems tell us to, just get on with things, and that, think our way out of our problems, and, that's, forget about stuff. I think we're conditioned, and our belief systems really have a huge impact on us ignoring what's going on. And it's really only when we reach points where maybe some crisis comes in, and it's like, I have to change. I need some change. I don't want to be with myself. I don't want to live with myself the way I am at the moment, with chronic stress, with a sense of being in that survival response all the time. And that's what begins to happen when things are not processed and dealt with, is that we begin to react to the world rather than respond. Our behavior begins to be heightened. We become vigilant. And I think that those cues in a lot of people's lives at the time is like, I don't want to be this way. I don't want to live with pain in my body and holding, and look, why is my body held? So a little bit of exploration, when you start to explore why is my body held, it's like, I wasn't designed for my shoulders to live up here. How do I get them to go from here and allow some release to happen? But there's a reason why they're held and protecting the body. There's a reason why we go into that response of flexor muscles holding. And I think that's the time when we start looking and we say, okay, well, maybe I need to find a different approach. I may have done the talk therapies and they're amazing. You can tell all your stories, but maybe that's not enough. Maybe my body is still holding. So that's where I come in. Like I know that place of telling all the stories and then I'm not really understanding, well, why am I still not feeling okay in myself? Well, why is there still I still ill at ease within me? And that's where body work comes in, is that I can change the way my nervous system reacts to the world in a way that I can begin to slow things down and work at a pace that I would prefer to be at, be able to move from sympathetic charge when I need it, a healthy nervous system, to parasympathetic, where I can rest, digest, heal. So moving in and out of that in a way that's easy. When I'm stay stressed and I'm not able to sleep and I'm not able to, my digestion's bad, when my musculature is held in different ways, that signifies that there's something going on that my body is holding. And it might be holding chronic stress, might be holding traumas from the past. Whether they're hard traumas, which are those big events that you talked about, the big events that have gone on, maybe from childhood, maybe from accidents, injuries, any type of abuse, and they impacted the body the same way as lots of accumulated stress. So we're talking about physiology holding tension patterns, and it's almost as if, things have happened and I'm held. I don't know how to get out of the held response. So this work teaches you how to begin to move out of that, almost tease the body out of that place of holding. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, for sure. That was great. Thank you. It was reminding me when you were speaking there, I'm sure you maybe come across it before, Stanley Kellerman. And I was reading a book of his recently called Your Body Speaks Its Mind, which is a really lovely book. And I'm kind of paraphrasing him here. This isn't kind of exactly what he said, but at least what I took from it is he was saying that kind of tension in the body is essentially resistance. And sometimes that resistance is really important. Like if you need to walk, you need to be able to resist gravity. So like tension, resistance, not automatically bad. But sometimes you could create tension from resisting something that maybe you shouldn't have had to resist, or it was difficult to resist, or whatever it might be. And then again, if you don't learn how to let that resistance go, it almost kind of keeps you trapped in that state of resistance, where even if then the event has gone, to a certain extent, like physically you're still there, I guess. And I was finding it interesting at the beginning when you're saying that you do a lot of work specifically on the flexor muscles. And I was wondering if you wouldn't mind maybe explaining why they would be particularly important muscles to work with.
So during a response to incidents that are overwhelming, the body goes into protection. And that protection mode is the frontal body kind of going into fetal position. So if I hear a really loud bang, I'm automatically going to go into that response. If this work was developed while David Berceli was in war zones, and that's what he saw happening, that people who listen to shelling and stuff, that's their body would automatically go into this flexor response. Now, other body workers have talked about this all along the way, is that protection, when we try to protect ourselves, the flexor muscles, the frontal muscles of the body, are the ones that have the impact of contracting. If you don't come out of that contracted place, then posture changes, the way we move in our lives change, then, and it has impacts then on all the other stuff, because not only do you have the response in your musculature, it's also a hormonal response, because that's protection, and the stress response of the fight, flight, freeze response goes into, it's a hormonal autonomic response that happens initially, and that sends signals to muscles, it sends signals to other parts of the systems in the body to adapt to, I'm in survival mode, and there's no thinking your way out of survival mode. If my life is under threat, I'm going to go into this flex position, fetal position, and that's the way I'm going to respond, or I'm going to run away. So why they use those muscles of the lower limbs is connected to, if I want to fight and if I want to flee, I'm going to be using those lower muscles to do that. The core muscles of the body.
Yeah. So that's kind of, those are the main muscles where we might get this holding pattern. Another question I wanted to ask you, so this again might be kind of a big one, and we at the Yoga Hub, it's a very like multicultural place. We get people from all different backgrounds and all different parts of the world attending the studios. Dublin just in general is so multicultural these days. And also with this podcast, we get a lot of people listening from different parts of the world as well. So I don't want to make this too localized to a certain extent. And I'm sure there would be things from all different cultures that would make this kind of work relevant to them. But do you think there is anything like specific in the kind of Irish psyche that particularly benefits from this kind of work?
Irish psyche. I mean, if I'm coming from my own, I feel like it's a bit of a judgment, though. So that part of it, I don't know how beneficial that would be. But yes, we're not people who we do hold a lot of fear. I think as Irish people, we've been brought up with fearing church, state, and I think that is in psyche. Their psyches, and the stuff around religion, it's about behaving, isn't it? And if you're doing releasing, connecting to yourself, body work, it's almost going in the opposite direction of, I'm going to behave and be good. One of these, people who follows the rules, and the rules of our society have been generally to not be free and easy and be at ease with our physiology. I think there's a bit of hellness in it. So that's my reluctance to talk about that question.
No, I was just asking you to kind of do a big cultural critique there just off the cuff, but no, I appreciate the answer. Thank you. And just also come back to something that you mentioned earlier, because I think maybe similar to trauma, if someone was to kind of just hear this word, it might to a certain extent sound a little bit off-putting potentially, but it's the trembling that you mentioned that can come about as part of this work. And I guess my question would be, why is that something to not be afraid of? And what are the benefits that kind of might come from this type of response?
Okay, so I suppose it's around being curious. Here's something new to learn. It's novel. It's quite interesting to know that the body's capable of doing something that all mammals do. That if you watch wildlife videos, you'll see tremoring, trembling, shaking happen to release the charge. And why not? Why not? Why do we have to go around and being held? Could we not invite in a different system to release held tension? And the benefits of releasing held tension is to become more connected to yourself, more embodied, more boundaried, because with held tension is we're vigilant, but so boundaries are we're probably pushing things away. It changes not only our nervous system response, but also maybe it changes the way we breathe. It changes the pace of our heart rate. It changes therefore it changes the way we think. It changes the way we behave. So a tight, contracted system that has speed going on inside leads to conflict a lot of the time, leads to vigilance, it leads to fear, going around in life with behaviours that possibly we're uncomfortable with. And if we think about what's the opposite of that, if we free up our system and allow health to move through all the systems of the body, that creates more creativity in us. A health system is not creative. It's very hard to be creative when we're in the threat response or the stress response. So then freer thinking, less vigilance, easier movement in the body, that we're not holding on to, because contraction can mean pain. So and for a lot of people it does mean pain. So when you're talking about back pain, shoulder pain, neck pain, that can be very much connected to psoas contraction, chronic stress.
I feel I feel like with every episode of this podcast I do, I eventually have to mention them at some point, but I've got 2 daughters, two young kids. And for me, like, it's amazing to see how they process, because kids obviously get upset irrationally sometimes, but they don't tend to hold on to things for too long, because they allow themselves to go through this like physical reaction, whether it's crying, throwing a little temper tantrum. For me, I find with like my older daughter in particular, she's 3. It's just like, if you just get her to like walk for a little bit, like you just need to like walk it off. They just allow things to move through them. And then 5 minutes later, she could be like, you know, just back to laughing and joking around. Whereas 5 minutes previous, it was like the end of the world. And I don't think society would function that well if we all behaved like 3-year-olds. But at the same time, I do think there's a lot that we can learn from that ability to process, allow the experience to take place, and then through that, like, just move on. I know it's not that easy depending on what we're trying to move on from, but definitely allowing that physical response to take place is I think really important, and maybe even sometimes different as well from like you might get from some schools of meditation or anything, this idea of like being in a state of Zen, which can almost lead to, if taken the wrong way, this kind of like spiritual bypassing of like good vibes only kind of. And yeah, I guess so in the work that you do, how would you like frame like the strength of actually physically responding to a certain situation and the benefits to it?
I think it's possibly relearning what we already know, or learning something for the first time. So it depends on whether there's developmental stuff that's gone on. But there is a time, as you say, you look at your kids and how they're able to process. They're able to move in and out of different states, and our state changes continually. So if we check in, we're in one place, and 5 minutes later we check in with ourselves, we might be somewhere else. So it's the allowing something to become a habit, to get to know it really well, just like we know all the stuff that all the health stuff in us, or we have learned how to do something really well, and sometimes that's how to hold on to things, how to not process. So it's that relearning. What is it like to start looking inward, processing, getting to know ourselves a little bit better, in our physicality? And if we start looking and acknowledging, then the state begins to shift. And that we're always attempting to do that in the TRE processes, that it's therapeutic work that is happening, and you're moving from possibly a held chronic state of stress and moving into a place where I feel more ease. So I'm holding myself differently. Oh, I have a different experience here of myself, of who I am. And usually it's moving in the direction of ease when it's titrated and when it's regulated. So it's not about kind of, getting a fizzy Coke bottle and shaking it up and opening it up and letting it all spill out. It's not about meeting your deepest, darkest fears. It's about really measured approach of getting a sense of what is my baseline? Where is my baseline, and where is it at? And am I happy where my baseline is? When I get stressed, does it take me a long time to come back to my baseline? Could I do with changing where my baseline is and bringing it down lower to a place where when I'm at rest, that I'm fully able to rest? And that's what the work does. It teaches us what it's like to know your nervous system and to shift in the nervous system and to let things happen in life. And we can get really stressed, and that's fine, but it's whether we're able to return easily to a baseline that we're happy with.
Sounds nice. Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time out to chat and to share your insights with us. The final thing I'll ask is, we're obviously very lucky to be hosting you for a workshop at yogahub in Camden Street soon, end of August. And if you wouldn't mind maybe just taking a couple of moments to give people a little preview of maybe what's going to be covered in the workshop and what they can expect.
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, it's a day of TRE, a little bit of theory. We're running, I think it's the 25th of August that we're doing it, and it's a full day. It's during the day we'll do some theory around what trauma is, what TRE is, go through what the exercises are, and do some of the shaking, do some of the self-regulation work, the grounding work, and the connecting, what's it like to be in community, because in community it's very helpful to do this work, then to be met and to be held in a group setting can feel really nice. Then we get witnessed in where we're at. So it's about how we turn the tremors on and how we turn the tremors off. So you learn how to do that. We'll do a couple of shakes during the day, so you get to experience it a couple of times and to bring it home with you. So this was developed so that people do self-practice. So that's what David Berselli, it was kind of like, how can he bring about a therapeutic model, a body-based therapeutic model that people can work on themselves. And it's really good to learn it safely and get a sense of what the work is about and the theory around it, and then start adding in what our personal experience of it is. So that's what we'll be doing during the day: exploring, playing, being curious, feeling into the body, and getting to know what it's like to release and to connect.
Sounds great. I'm hoping to be able to attend myself, and yeah, we're really, really looking forward to having you here. So thank you again for taking the time out of your day to have this chat, and yeah, we look forward to seeing you in person very soon.
Great, thanks, Brian. It's been lovely to chat about it, and thank you for everything.